Hello! This is an advanced guide to Flight of Nova missions, and in this video I'm going to be going over something that I've seen many complaints about on the forums, the Steam forums and on the Discord server, and that is long distance travel. Many people would prefer, if they need to go a long distance, say 9,000 kilometers, that they don't have to just get into an orbit and then coast along, not doing anything until their orbit takes them to the location of their destination. So this video is going to show one possible solution to that, and let's just get right into that. So we've started a normal launch profile, and if you're familiar with the way that I normally do launches, you'll notice that I just start to pitch over a little bit faster on this launch than I normally do. So it's still pretty much vertical up to about 10 kilometers. But then after that, we want to get down to about 30 degrees by about 20 kilometers. And I better hurry up because I'm kind of overshooting here. And then about 20 degrees by 30 kilometers and so forth. Alright. So the idea is to end up at a very fast speed while still in the atmosphere. So we're going to overshoot our target altitude of 65 kilometers by a little bit, but that demonstrates, will allow me to demonstrate what to do in that situation. So I'm just keeping us in the atmosphere, and then as we start to have negative vertical speed, we'll be able to use our periapsis to decide or to see how low into the atmosphere we're going to get. So I want that to be 65 kilometers. So I'm going to just use my angle here to get that periapsis down to 65 kilometers. As we continue to accelerate, and you can see that we're now well past orbital velocity. And the combination of just being faster plus being lower to the ground, 65 kilometers is definitely lower than typically we orbit at in Flight of Nova. The combination of those two things causes us to be much faster than we would typically orbit at. Now, as we get down to our periapsis, I'm going to angle the craft downward in order to stay there. And you can use your vertical speed indicator to confirm that you're doing that successfully. So basically what I want to do is hang out at around 65 kilometers, because that is an area of the atmosphere where this spacecraft is well within its temperature zone. It's not taking any damage from this amount of temperature, and the air is thick enough that it can hold us down like this, and it's thin enough that we can keep a pretty fast speed. So basically that's what I'm going to do this whole rest of the way, is just watch my VSI and try not to deviate too far away from 65 kilometers. Now I've picked a location destination that's pretty far away from me, so we'll have a little bit of time to coast here, and that will just let me talk about a couple of things and also show what happens when you lose your speed, which is pretty straightforward, but we can just demonstrate it. One other thing that I just sort of hinted at is that the different ships handle doing this rather differently. The EX5 has very, very good thermal characteristics. The other two ships would not be too happy with doing this, so you have to let them, you have to give them a little bit more leeway. Go a bit slower or a bit higher or both. But with the EX5, you can take it up to a little bit higher temperatures. So hopefully you can see what's going on here. Normally, when you're in the atmosphere in a craft that has wings, you use those wings to go up. But in this case, we're actually using the wings to push us downward towards the planet by rolling inverted and angling down. And what that lets us do is keep ourselves at our periapsis and rotate the entire orbit around the planet and keep us in that periapsis where the atmosphere is, so that we can continue doing that indefinitely. And eventually the atmosphere will slow us back down again, so we don't have to use fuel to slow down. And the upshot of all of that is that it means that we can travel long distances around the planet lower than orbital altitude at much higher than orbital velocity. And also, by doing this, we have something to do the whole time. We have to watch our VSI and make sure that we're on course and in the flight envelope. And we're now rather slow. We're still much faster than orbital velocity, but slow for for this method of travel. And so I'm just going to boost us back up, and you can see that I'm just keeping us near 65 and our VSI near 0. I'm just going to boost us back up to maybe 14.5 kilometers per second, something like that. Just make sure that our periapsis doesn't deviate too much off of 65 kilometers. And when you're this fast, you don't want to go too much faster than this, because then your control authority starts to become insufficient to to keep you down in the atmosphere. And that sort of becomes a vicious cycle, because then you have to use engines to stay down, and that speeds you up again, and you can sort of lose control of the situation if you do that. So 14.5 kilometers per second, maybe 15 is just about the limit. So one other thing I want to talk about while we're traveling here is the other way that you can do fast travel, and that is simply to intercept an orbital station. And for anyone who just cringed or recoiled at that thought, hear me out for just a second. If you've seen my other advanced guide on very fast station intercepts, you'll have seen that there are techniques to be able to intercept the low altitude stations, the 185 kilometer stations, in really only about 5 or 6 minutes of real world time. And oops, accidentally hit the rudder there. Just 5 or 6 minutes of real world time, and it's very fun to do that. Once you get past the point where it's stressful or work to do, and you're able to do that technique on demand, it's a very fast thing, but quite a fun thing to go to an orbital station. And once you're there, you can time warp, or if you pick one of the large stations like Aachen or Greenhouse, then you can actually just hang out there at the station and do some station local missions, because those big stations have missions for you that you can do between docking ports at the station. And you can actually just orbit around in real time while doing some local missions until the station ends up where you want to be. And that's what I usually find myself doing when I want to go long distances, is I will intercept Aachen station and just do some local missions while it orbits around. And that's pretty much the same as letting your own spacecraft orbit around the planet. The stations orbit at the same speed, but you've actually got something to do along the way. It's not just you drifting through the void. It's you drifting through the void next to a station that wants you to do some jobs for it. So that's an enjoyable kind of way to go long distances. Alright, so now we're below 3,000 kilometers distance, and so now we're going to have to start thinking about slowing down. So I like to end this technique by aerobraking rather than slowing down with the engines. That's just a nice feature of this technique, that it allows you to do that pretty easily. You can also stop angling down and so that the spacecraft flies up into the upper atmosphere or up into space, so that you can then have enough control authority to rotate around and point the main engines backward and use retrograde thrust to slow down. You can do that, but I prefer not to. So I'm going to show you what I do to slow down using aerobraking. So basically below 3,000 kilometers distance is when I start thinking about how I'm going to stop. And you see I've let myself drift upward. That was not an accident. That's because I was a little bit slow, and I wanted to let some of that speed continue, or to keep some of that speed and not lose it. However, and to continue that thought, if you're higher up, you bleed off speed slower because the air is thinner. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough in this case. I am going to have to speed up just a little bit more here. So that should be fine. And you sort of get a feeling for this as you do it a few times. Basically, what I want to do is end up at about 10 kilometers per second around the time that I'm about 1,000 kilometers distant from the target. I also ideally want to be around 60 kilometers in altitude. So now I'm having to correct the other way. I'm going to just try and quickly get some downward velocity here. I think I am going to be a little bit above my preferred sort of range of values for this, but it should still work out fine. And once we pass below 1,000 kilometers distance, now we're going to start really trying to slow down. So we'll do these big S turns. And from this point onward, I really don't look at the vertical speed indicator or altitude or anything at all except the hull temperature. And what I'm trying to do at this point is maintain a hull temperature of above 1,000 degrees. And as you can see, I'm quite a bit below that. So I'm continuing to angle down more so that it increases the temperature. I'm wanting to get that temperature up because, you know, higher temperature means that I'm slowing down faster. Of course, there is a limit to how fast you can slow down, how much temperature the spacecraft can tolerate. And also, since we're going sideways, we don't want to get too far off course, so I'm, you know, occasionally you want to flip back around and start going sideways the other way. Alright, so now we're definitely in the danger zone for temperature, so we want to point back up again a little bit. This spacecraft can handle 1,300 degrees C before it starts taking damage. But it starts warning you that there's going to be a problem around 12. So you don't want to go above 12 for too long if you can avoid it. But if you're going to overshoot, you can always risk it. I think we just barely made it. Yeah, we're going to be able to do this without taking damage. So there's kind of an art to doing that, but as long as you follow those basic rules that I just went over, you'll be pretty much fine most of the time. And as you can see, that was pretty fast. I mean, it still took 17 minutes to get here, but that was a 9,000 kilometer journey, which would have been quite a bit longer if we had done it at normal orbital velocity. So saved a lot of time there, and at least to me, more importantly, it gives you something to concentrate on and think about while you're while you're doing the journey. It's not just going AFK and getting a cup of coffee or something while your ship floats through space. It's something that you can actually do during that time, without wasting too much fuel. Which I think is fun. So there we go. If you haven't ever been to this base, it's certainly worth paying a visit to the North Pole at least once. Pretty scenic, I think. Alright, so that's the technique. Hope you liked the guide, and let me know if you give it a try. Good luck and have fun.